Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of On the Couch with Creatives. I say good morning because I'm here in the UK, but good afternoon or good evening if you're anywhere else in the world. I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Julie Hyde-Mew.
And this is On the Couch with Creatives. Fans and followers of our show will know by now that we're part of the Creatives Group, the private network for creative professionals everywhere. Together, we help you create at your best, connect you with like-minded individuals, and therefore help you to grow your creative business. If that sounds like a good idea to you and you'd like to find out more, please don't hesitate to reach out to us after the show. We'd be delighted to talk to you. But as I said, this is On the Couch. So Julie, who do we have on the couch today?
On the couch today is voiceover artist and voice actor Anthony HEWSON, and he works primarily from his home studio in the South Cambridgeshire countryside here in the UK. He's been a finalist for 16 voiceover awards 16 times and has recorded in most voiceover genres, from commercials and branding videos to audio dramas, video games, and he's been cast as the voice of God. And once we get him on the couch, you are going to understand why he was cast in the role of the voice of God. So let's get him on the couch, Melanie. Hello, Anthony. Welcome to On the Couch with Creatives. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Julie. Hi, Melanie. How are you both?
Very well. All the better to see you and all the better to hear you. Your wonderful voice. We were just saying that you were cast in the role of the voice of God, and obviously people can hear that just from the timbre of your voice. It's just wonderful. So we'll talk more about that now. But
That's
let's first start off with how you became a voiceover artist, because you weren't one before, were you? You were a copywriter and an editor.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, I'd sort of played around with acting when I was at school and at university. I studied drama at university. We took plays on tour, and then kind of reality bites when you leave. I dropped out of university actually for financial reasons. So I ended up going back and working with my parents' technical recruitment firm for quite a few years, and it was not something I loved. It was not something I was particularly good at. I don't suppose I did them any favors at all by working with them. but but ultimately I knew I had two things that I was innately quite good at and enjoyed, and those two things were writing and acting. Acting, as far as I could see at that point, and voiceover wasn't something that had ever popped onto my radar. You know, for all that I studied drama at university, it simply hadn't entered my consciousness as a possibility, as something to even consider. So taking up acting again in my 20s would have involved realistically going on theatre tours or doing strange little plays at schools and stuff, none of which held any real appeal to me. So writing was the obvious thing to focus on. I'd taken a job with a car company, and off the back of that, I started doing a little bit of freelance copywriting. I set up a website, wrote it myself, got a few clients doing little jobs. I thought I need more of a stepping stone. So a position came up doing PR and communications with a FTSE 250 company, which I took. And that couple of years, 2.5 years there, gave me such a grounding in writing for all sorts of different audiences, in communicating with people at every level of a company, that I felt I'd be in a much stronger position, having experienced a wider variety of people and environments, to go out and write for a living. But actually finding that opportunity is not always straightforward. I ended up going completely freelance. A couple of positions, freelance roles landed in my inbox in the same week, the week of my birthday, actually. And so I quit the PR job, went freelance writing, and I spent 15 years doing that full time. But alongside that, I was doing the odd voiceover job. And this was with no training, and no real guidance from anyone who knew the industry either. It was something.
So why were you getting voiceover jobs when you had no experience in training?
Well, it's two things. So when I was at this company previously, I'd actually done two internal voiceover roles. The CEO came to me and wanted me to be the voice of the company phone system. So I recorded that. And one of the company divisions wanted me to do a voice of God. That was actually the first thing I ever recorded for anyone, was a voice of God.
Okay, I want to hear this voice of God. Give us an example of the voice of God.
Well, it might be something as straightforward as and the nominees in the building management category are, and then you.
Oh, is that a voice of God?
That's
it's
one.
like oh, okay.
Yeah, voice of God is essentially a disembodied voice.
I thought it meant that you were cast in the role of
the
voice of God
on
a game or something.
That'd be sacrilege. For me to be playing God himself. No, no. Voice of God is a disembodied voice. So most commonly it's award ceremonies and so on. But it's also if you think of television programs with a live audience where you have an announcer bringing people to the stage or announcing a certain part of a game show, that's all voice of God. That's the category.
Like in the lottery.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. And that guy is I don't know his name. I have heard him interviewed. He's really, really good. The guy who does the lottery balls announcements.
Yeah, you get a very distinctive sound. You know, the guy that did Dancing on Ice for years, I think he died quite recently, which is really sad. But you know, they've got very distinctive voice, certain programs, and you can just tell that's the chap who does that. Even if you don't know the name, you sort of associate them with the program, don't you?
Absolutely. And those are, those sort of, some of those are recorded live as well. And I think live announcement is a very specialist area of voice of God and voiceover, because the amount of thinking on your feet and communication with the whole events team must be extraordinary. It's not something I would feel confident about taking on anytime soon, but it must be quite exhilarating.
There's always a script, and it's
there's
not
a script, but stuff changes.
Well, I can't. In what situation would something change in a sense that they would say, and here's Melanie, and then Melanie comes on the stage, and then she trips over, and then the voice of God says, "Oh dear, get up, Melanie." Okay, what other situation would the voice of God?
They could be geeing her up, couldn't they? I'm thinking more of live events. So if you go to things like park runs or charity runs and so on, you have frequently an announcer telling runners to come to this podium, to this stage, to the prep zone. There's all this sort of thing going on, and of course, giving fire drills and perhaps having to deal with a genuine emergency.
But that's an announcer. It's not a.
It falls under the same sort of that live announcer thing is the sort of the next stage along. So that's what I'm talking about being particularly tense. Although I imagine there could be a live televisual voice of God situation where something did go wrong and you could be the only voice. But you'd imagine a presenter would be in a better position to take charge. So should Melanie stack it down the stairs, then perhaps a presenter is a better person.
Trying to kill me off, Anthony.
It wasn't my idea, Melanie. I'm very sorry. I think you need to blame your partner in crime there. But yeah, so yeah, I think there's a very definite set of skills required for that kind of live role. But no, voice of God is just disembodied voice in any given event scenario. So this particular example was a pre-recorded voice of God for an award ceremony. So I had to go through the various nominees and so on. But once I was freelance copywriting, what I typically did was partner with creative agencies to write copy for all sorts of stuff. It could be brochures, opinion pieces, website content, and very occasionally, if I was lucky, something interesting like an animation, which might be introducing, I don't know, wind turbines. For instance, how they work, what payback a scheme might allow a landowner to get if they had wind turbines on on their land, and that frequently might require a voiceover. So I just got asked by the creative agency, oh, could you do the voice for this? And so there were several recordings I did, which I can only think were not of the greatest audio quality, because I wasn't recording in a dedicated booth. These were sort of amateur little setups here, there, and dotted in the corner of a creative agency's office without a professional level microphone. And I it's probably as well that they weren't paying me the going rate for voiceover for that.
But I can understand why they asked you, because you do have an amazing voice.
That's very kind, thank you.
I'm not being kind at all.
Very distinctive.
It's an observation.
Very distinctive.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's relatively distinctive, but yet, you occasionally get a message when you're kind of embedded within a community, and you probably must have had this in your own work in various ways, where someone says, were you involved in this? This has got all the hallmarks of you. And I have had a couple of times, not many times, people say, are you the voice on that product advert on the TV? And sadly, my message back has been, no. I did not get the audition for this. I did not get the opportunity. Someone else is bagging all that cash. But on the
it can be very embarrassing. Melanie and I were in London once, and we heard a public announcement, and she said, "Oh, that's the voice of Sarah." Sarah is one of our members. Well, she's a voiceover artist, obviously, but she's one of our members.
It really sounded like her.
And Melanie went totally starstruck and started messaging all over the place. I've just heard Sarah's voice. And then Sarah comes back, that's not me, Melanie.
Oh, no.
Well, that's
I'm not usually wrong, because usually when I say, oh, I've just heard Sarah in the voice of Marks and Spencer, I've been Marks and Spencer's, and it usually is her. So I was only wrong that once, and it was spooky, because didn't it, Julie? You were there. It really
did sound like
I made Julie stop in the middle of the train platform. I was like, stop.
Oh
my God, it's starting on the, and oh yes, said Julie. And then there's me, oh my God, Sarah, you're the voice of. No, I'm not. I was like, oh.
Yeah, that was embarrassing.
Carried away.
That is unfortunate.
You've been AI'd. Your voice has been stolen by London Underground.
Shocking, but it's incredible, isn't it, that even though you may have a distinctive voice, we're not so unique that there won't be some other people out there that sound similar enough that when it's played, especially through a tannoy at a railway station, it's not the purest way of listening to a voice, is it? So I think you can cut yourself some slack for being wrong.
It did sound like that spooky. I still swear there was something dodgy about that, because it did sound like that.
Oh well, maybe they nicked. Oh, better not say that. Allegedly. Okay, so Anthony, tell us more about becoming a full-time voiceover artist then, from being an amateur to going full-time freelance voiceover artist and actor.
Yeah, it was essentially an age thing, which sounds a bit absurd, but I'd just come up to my 40th birthday. I'd had various people make, very, very lovely comments and compliments and suggest I do more of this. I'd never promoted it anywhere as something I did. And I turned 40 and thought, you've kind of piddled around with this a bit, occasionally, sporadically, and frankly, time's marching on. I'd actually gone looking online in the early days of this being suggested to me. So going back to 2010, 2011, kind of time frame, and earlier. No, I can't do time. More like 2008, which was actually the year that Facebook came out, I think, or 2007. So because that was the social media was in its infancy, these are the days of internet forums. So I'd gone looking for information, thinking, how do I get involved in this? What do I do? And it was such a kind of closed off environment, where it struck me that there were kind of guardians at the gates, not letting people in, discouraging people, and And I thought, obviously I can't have what it takes. It's not just about a voice, and it isn't just about a voice. There are some voices out there doing amazing work that you wouldn't necessarily listen to their voice and think, oh, I could listen to that voice all day. It's actually about being the everyman that's probably a more popular voice, because it's applicable across all sorts of situations, and it's relatable. So having some sort of distinctive voice isn't necessarily the best thing in the world. You don't pick Brian Blessed to do all your voiceovers. You choose him for certain impact, certain situations with impact. So, but I found that the message wasn't necessarily positive from the online community, and because this was before Facebook, more open discussions around things, I was discouraged, had stepped away from it. But coming forward to, I can't remember when I was 40. When was I 40? Sort of 2016, 2017. I thought it's time to start thinking about this seriously. So I did a bit of research. Facebook forums then were, Facebook groups were suddenly a thing where you could access information, where people were willing to share ideas and tips and point you in the right direction. So there was a Facebook group. I put a poll out in because I figured the first thing you need to do is get a decent demo recording. People need to know what you sound like, right? If you're going to be listed on a website or have your own website, people need to know what you sound like. And so I searched that Facebook group and then put up a question saying, who would you recommend for demo reels? And so I recorded, the very first time I'd recorded properly with anyone who knew what they were doing, my commercial reel, which I still use now, even 6 years on, 7 years on, because everyone I've waved it in front of who does reels says, oh, that's fine. It's kind of on trend enough. It's you enough that you don't need to look to update it yet. But I recorded it with a chap called Martin Fisher at Sonic Pond, who is the loveliest man, and very, very talented actor as well as audio editor, and put that reel out there and started trying to get listed on reputable voiceover websites, because not all voiceover websites are created equal. Not all enjoy a positive reputation, and not all treat voice actors completely as they should. But I essentially reworked my website, started putting myself out there, started applying for a few things, and gradually, proper jobs would come in. And by this point, there's an organization called Gravy for the Brain, which is a voiceover training.
Everybody recommends that. Everybody recommends that.
Well, had they existed back when I first sort of started making forays into it, then I would have been doing this a lot longer properly, because they've got the resources, they've got the expertise, and they've got the willingness and the openness to help you and be honest. So what they've also done is create a rate guide, because different voiceover genres charge in different ways, and that's not at all apparent if you're outside the industry. You've got no frame of reference. So them publishing a rate guide to say, okay, you are always free to set your own rates, but typically what people charge or find they are offered within the industry is this for this genre, this for this. That was hugely useful. So once these resources start becoming available to you, you're in a position to go out and market yourself much more effectively. So I was running the voiceover part-time alongside my copywriting and copy editing work until 2.5 years ago, I think it was, when I had built up enough of a buffer to say, okay, I'm tired of trying to think of words for other people. I want all the scripts. I want to not do thinking beyond how I interpret something and how I connect with an audience, because copywriting, as you probably know, is a challenging thing, trying to put yourself into situations where you have to come up with new ways of describing old concepts. So yes, I was pleased to be in a situation where I could put that to one side and focus on the voice work.
But that background does help you, because obviously you must get scripts where the grammar's wrong, or
Yeah.
it doesn't quite work the way you write it and the way you say it. So
Yes.
you've got that.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly useful. I'm used to when I was writing, I worked with not just British companies, but companies all around the world. So you very often had scripts that were translated, or at least were written in a second language, in English as a second language. So therefore, there was always work coming in where my primary purpose was to tweak, to make those changes into natural English, but without losing the impact, the rhythm, the meaning, the emotional pull. And it also means, of course, that you've got, as a writer, you've generally got a natural way with words. The advantage, of course, is that you have time to think about them when you're writing them, as opposed to coming up with something live, but you generally understand the rhythms of speech and of communication. You understand how sentences are structured. You understand some of the psychology behind persuasion. And if you combine that with having a bit of an acting background, then you're pretty well equipped. But yeah, I do feel confident enough. It still has to be diplomatically done. When I'm given a script where there are issues, and these can be varying issues from "this makes no sense" to, that, well, I think that doesn't trip off the tongue properly. Or it creates a trip hazard for your tongue, because certain combinations of words are really easy to say if we're just chatting, but put yourself in front of a microphone and all of a sudden that'll trip you up.
Being a voiceover artist isn't just about sitting in front of a microphone and saying the words. You actually, especially if you freelance, but even if you're not, you have to deal with your client. You have to be a diplomat. You have to be a business person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're probably, sadly, more business person than voiceover artist, because that's the nature of things. I think there must be very few of us who are sitting around thinking, I've got no time at all to do my invoices, to try to find new clients, because I've just got work constantly coming at me. I can barely voice it fast enough. That'll be a lovely position to be in, where I just spent the entire time in there, and then someone else did all the audio editing and finding me work. But no, sadly, as a business owner, you do have to go out and try and make new contacts. You do have to do the admin stuff, but I hope that you get to a situation where you can outsource, some of the more mundane aspects. But you're always going to have to deal with clients. You're always going to have to be diplomatic.
Before we get onto the voice acting side of what you do, could we have a quick listen to your commercial demo tape?
We can't stop ourselves.
The new generation i20 from Hyundai. Once you open your eyes to inspiration, you'll see it everywhere. There are movements so perfect, you'd hardly think they were made by humans. Omega Coaxial, the most perfect mechanical watch movement we've ever created. Join us. You belong to the Smiler. The Smiler, the world's first 14-looping roller coaster. Book now at altontowers.com. Have you discovered Karcher pressure washers? Whatever the outdoor cleaning task, with a Karcher pressure washer, you'll have it done in no time. At Hiscox, we exist to make good in times of loss, and give our word that we will be there when you need us. Bupa has lots of free online tools to help you get in shape. To download our running app and much more, search Find Healthy. It's time to escape with Here Comes Summer, featuring Dean Martin,
How do you like
Dionne Warwick,
eggs in the
and
morning?
Andy Williams. Big meeting. Dave is in the office, but off-site somewhere. Jenny is out of office, but not incommunicado. And the boss doesn't do diaries, so he's always out. New and exclusive, Raiders of the Lost Past begins with Hitler and the Spear of Destiny, tonight at 9 on Yesterday.
So that was the dulcet tones of Voiced by Ant, voiceover artist. So Anthony, how long was that reel, and what is there a recommended length for a demo reel for somebody in your position, for anybody out there who's thinking of, oh God, I need to put one of these together?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's just a little over 1 minute 30. And ideally you should keep all demo reels to under 2 minutes. That's kind of the cutoff line. I think there may be an exception for audiobooks, which might be rather longer. But since I don't do audiobooks, don't take my word for it. I would also say that, I mean, that's obviously a professionally produced demo. And while I'm a capable audio editor, you're much better off, if you are looking to go out and get a reel recorded, to go to someone who specializes in producing reels. Because unless you've worked in that industry producing audio for a market, you're probably not best placed to judge your own voice, what will necessarily be the best showcase for your abilities, for the genres. Guidance is always going to be useful, I think. Some people do make their own. Some people have won awards for reels they've made themselves. But it's probably best to get unless you know you're in a situation where you can produce sterling work, go out there and find recommended demo reel producers, and they'll specialize in doing that.
Well,
Yeah.
they say that the sound of your voice in what you can hear, which is resonating around your skull, is
Yeah.
completely different to what people you are talking to are hearing. And that's why so many people, when they hear their voices on tape, say, oh my word, my voice is dreadful. Is that what I
Yeah.
sound like?
Yeah.
So it is good to get or it is recommended to get an outside person to do that.
Sound is really complicated. You know, having mixed the sound for our film Scooch that we did, sound is really technical. It's really,
Yeah.
there are so many different things involved in it, and I'm not an expert sound engineer, and I'm not sure I'd want to train as one, to be honest, because it is hugely involved. And even, I mean, I do reels for professional speakers,
Right.
but even so, it's of a level where, you know, if you're a voice actor, the mixing has
Yeah.
got to be spot on,
It has.
and the levels have got to be spot on, and you need to understand all the stuff and how it works. And it is a skill. It's a skill, and it's
It
worth
is.
investing in.
Yeah. It's also a difficult thing to even, if you've got the option, for instance, if you've been working a while, to pull together a demo reel from pre-existing work, because you've got the capability. If you can get hold of the audio in high enough quality, that's, you know, once it's been used rather than your raw recording. But there's no guarantee that the way that the producers produced it for that spot, that purpose, is actually the way that's going to showcase your voice best. I did a campaign, a TV campaign, for a brand I won't mention, and while I really enjoyed the adverts, I felt that the sound mix was not to the balance I'd have chosen. It certainly wasn't a balance that would allow me to put that audio into a reel and showcase my voice. Priority was given to music and sound effects. So there's no guarantee that an end product is going to be right either. Much better to have something that's actually been generated specifically for the purpose of showcasing what you do.
Yeah.
Now, you also call yourself a voice actor. So tell us about the acting part of your job.
Well, I mean, essentially, those terms are slightly interchangeable. There's a bit of a debate you'll come across in voiceover forums, on the basis that any voice work you undertake, you are essentially acting a part. If I voice a commercial or a brand film, launching a rebrand for something, essentially I am embodying the voice of that brand. I'm taking on a character in order to communicate that message. So there's an element of acting, and there's an element of creating something that's natural, as opposed to just reading words off a page. But true voice acting is, of course, is acting. Except you're, rather than being able to work with your entire body and facial expressions and so on theatre or on screen, you're having to convey all of that through your voice. But there are several genres where voice acting is a speciality, and there are people that specialize entirely in certain fields. So animations, video games, audio and radio dramas being the obvious places, but increasingly you've got gamified e-learning and exhibitions and museum pieces. So I've voiced weirdly, strangely enough, several monks. Seems to be religious people.
What? Are you chanting and droning, and what are you doing?
Droning might be the right word. No, I I've not done any chanting, but no. If you go to an abbey or an ancient a medieval cathedral or something, there'll frequently be an audio guide to tell you about the history of the place, and you'll have obviously a voiceover role is to record audio guides, and that can be a very strictly factual. You are now approaching this particular exhibition featuring these artifacts, or it might be I becoming a character. I am the Bishop of Bath and Wells. Get that Blackadder 2 reference in. I am the Bishop of Bath and Wells, and embodying that character to tell a little bit about your history, your significance in the history of that building. So it's a new area, I think, because I don't think that's historically how museum guides have been done, and increasingly different learning courses, online learning courses for employees are also involving not just now click this button to see what happens on the screen, turn this, answer this question. They're actually putting you into semi-real life situations where you're expected to make decisions based on what the characters within a scene are doing. So it's another area where proper acting comes into play.
If you could have your dream job, Anthony, like your dream voiceover job, what voice would you really love to be? So if somebody just said, wave to us, right, dream gig in your inbox, what would it be?
Darth Vader.
Darth Vader. No, I think what's his face? James L.
Jones.
Yeah. He sold his voice with the estate. That opportunity will now never be available to anyone. So no Darth Vader opportunities. I think I'd really like. I've never done a movie trailer, so I would. And movie trailers are not the same as that in a world where that historical Don LaFontaine style doesn't really exist so much anymore, but it's fun to do. So I'd love to do a movie trailer in that style, but I think I'd settle for a big commercial campaign for Aston Martin, assuming they paid me in Aston Martins.
I like that.
Which I think is only fair, right?
Good choice.
Yeah, thank you.
And you'd need more than one because it'd probably break down.
I'm saying nothing, Aston Martin. Your cars are amazing. Please give me the work. TVR, on the other hand.
Yeah, well, that's better than Ferrari. Yeah. That's another story.
So what are your top 3 tips for voiceover artists and voiceover actors?
Okay. Well, I've actually come up with 3 tips that I think I've drawn from voiceover that apply to a wider audience, to people in all sorts of different roles. And I've got 3 tips for new voiceover actors. So shall I go with the voice actor ones first?
Yeah, roll them out.
Okay. So I think first of all, do your research before you dive in and start recording stuff for people, putting your name out there and saying I do this. Until you've kind of been assessed, you don't know that you're ready, and the last thing you want to do is put your name in front of someone who might be a hirer in future who looks at your stuff and says, that's not good, right? Okay, well, we just anything that comes through from this person will now ignore, because there's that risk if you're not doing it well enough. There are really great training resources out there where you can learn the basics and beyond. Places like Gravy for the Brain, which we mentioned earlier. There's an organization called Voiceover Kickstart. There's the Voiceover Network. And there are lots of voiceover workout groups. Once you start connecting with people and getting to know people, you find out about these things. So there are voiceover workout groups where you might meet weekly for a minimal fee or sometimes no fee, and you get to be directed by others, practice different scripts, and find out what really works. Sitting in your own box, while that might be how you spend most of your time when you're actually working as a voiceover artist, isn't the best way to learn how to be better, more versatile, to come up with the deliveries that are on trend or that will really really resonate with an audience. So, join Facebook groups for voiceover, search those groups for all your questions before you post a question, but really take on board all the answers, because most people in this industry are actually really helpful. Partly, I think, not just because they're nice people, but because it's in their interests for you to know what you're doing. If you're charging the right money, if you're doing the right things, then you lift the level of professionalism rather than allowing it to sink lower. So I think go out and find information en masse, get information from more than one person. Don't read one article that says use this microphone and take that as gospel.
Number 2.
Yeah. I think be really careful about what you voice, what you sign up to. That probably most of us have naively recorded something we oughtn't to have in the early days of our careers. And while most voiceover jobs ought to be based on a license basis, so you license a recording to be used on these channels for this length of time for this amount of money, on some of the what's known as pay-to-play websites, where you sign up, you're not necessarily assessed for how good you are. Jobs come in, you might bid for them, you might put an audition in for them. In lots of those cases, you don't have any control about where your voice goes, which is wrong, I think. But nonetheless, there are cases where your voice goes away and is just used. So think about if you want to be the voice of that product forever on all these channels, on these websites, because that won't go away. You've done that, and you're going to be associated with that potentially forever. So try to be a little bit strategic, even if you're desperate for that work. Because I've had a couple of things, approaches that were made to me in the early days, and I thought, not for any money am I going to record that, because someone might recognize my voice further down the line. I may not have an ethical issue with that, but I think that it's enough of a trip hazard for that to be a problem at a later date. So just be mindful and strategic about what you take on.
Number 3.
Try to get involved in voiceover communities online, because that's the first place to start looking, and then in person if possible, because it'll absolutely make a difference to your confidence, your knowledge, and even the work you do, because you'll pick up work through referrals in time, and it will just be, you'll have people to ask questions of. Because if you try to tackle this alone, then you're shooting in the dark, and you're potentially doing yourself a massive disservice and handicapping yourself. Whereas if you start to get to know people in the industry that you can turn to for questions, well, what kind of rate should I be charging for this? I've never voiced the voice of a toy before, squeeze its tummy and it says something. What should I charge for that? Most of us wouldn't know. Thankfully, the Gravy for the Brain guide does give some indications, but there are always new areas popping up, new streaming channels, all sorts of places where your voice might appear. So understanding how to charge for that, how you'd approach it, suddenly it can sometimes take a group effort, some discussion. So what would you do?
I never thought of that a voiceover artist would voice a squeaky toy, but of course they would.
Yeah, it wouldn't have occurred to me either. Prior to being involved, it's amazing what you don't think about And yet almost everywhere we go, you'll hear a voice somewhere on something, doing something, and it's probably a voiceover artist, and hopefully not one that's been exploited.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, every voice anywhere, even like say in cartoons, when you hear dogs bark or ducks quack or that's a person doing that. It's not a dog barking, it's somebody shouting like and a lot of children voices in cartoons are adults voicing as children.
Yes, yeah,
a lot of the time.
Yeah. And also there's ADR, there's background talking. You know, if you watch a film, then you know that we don't know necessarily until someone's told you that actually there was also a group of voice actors in a room in a studio or perhaps in their own studios recording background conversations, so that you've got the sound of the street passers by, you know, other people in the doctor's waiting room. Yeah. So it's the opportunities are huge, really.
Do you do a lot of rhubarb recordings?
I have never professionally done rhubarb recordings, but this very Friday I am helping out another voice actor who's making a film with some ADR. Yes, which would be my first time. So I've done some animation dubbing just once, and this won't require lip sync, I don't believe, but yes, some improv, essentially improvised conversations with some other actors to have in the background of whatever scene the film has playing out.
And it's quite an art, really. I've been on stage once where I was an extra, and I was in part of the crowd. We had to be in conversation, and it's just getting the art of murmur without saying words or at such a pitch that you drown out the main actors.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are your other tips? You had 3 more tips.
Oh yeah, so I had a few ideas for things that I think might be helpful for anyone who's tips essentially from the world of voiceover that apply more widely. So I think, for instance, if you're writing anything important that's going to be read by another person, whether that's in their head or out loud, then take the time to read it aloud yourself and ask yourself questions like, does it flow? Does it really make sense? Is there ambiguity of meaning? And if it's a script of any sort, and certainly anything that's to be read out loud, are there combinations of words that trip you rather than trip off the tongue? So a favorite combination, I say favorite, a favorite trip for me is the phrase digital transformation, which I've just said fine. But if you put that in the middle of a complicated sentence, it's amazing how often you can trip over digital. So just be, you know, if you practice a few times with whatever you're writing, you'll discover phrases that don't sound right, that are hard to say. And while it's true that a professional voiceover artist is experienced and should be able to say absolutely anything you give them to say, if you want it to be perfect, it's worth bearing in mind that the easier you make it to say, the more natural it will sound to your ultimate listener. Are there simpler and friendlier ways of saying things? You know, cut out anything that's too formal or verbose, unless that's part of your brand. Unless you're writing for the love of words, then don't make it overly wordy. And if you're writing something like a radio script, a 30-second radio script, and it might seem extraordinary that I'm saying this, but clearly lots of creatives don't actually read their scripts out loud. So you find that you're having to cram in a script that is, you can only make it 35 seconds, reading at your fartest with none of the human nuance and pause and so on that you would give to give it, you know, to give it emphasis or to make it sound properly conversational. And yet you've been given a script that doesn't fit. And sometimes that means you're having to edit on the fly. I've been in a directed session where we've been looking to cut words, which helpfully is something I am good at doing anyway, but we're having to cut a script on the fly. And essentially that can cost money because you might need more time in the booth. And don't ever use an AI voice to gauge how long something takes, because it's not natural. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't understand. So Yeah, we receive a lot of AI guides these days. Here's the video, and here's there's an AI voice over it because we've been generating this as a pitch and we wanted to get approval. So that just gives you an idea. But actually, you can't follow that guide necessarily without it sounding unnatural. So I'd avoid that at all costs. Reading it out loud yourself will tell you whether it works.
Have you ever heard Stephen Fry's story about when he did the Harry Potter audiobooks?
I've heard one of Stephen Fry's stories.
She had written in the Philosopher's Stone, the first book, and he was taping the audiobook, and the sentence was Harry pocketed it, and he couldn't say it. He couldn't say it. And he kept saying pocket, and eventually he got it out, and he got on the phone to her, and he said, is it possible for future books that you don't write Harry pocketed it, but you write Harry put it in his pocket? And he said there was a long pause, and then he heard her say, no. And for every book, and by that time she'd only written 3 books, he said every book thereafter there was a sentence, Harry pocketed it. Pocketed it.
Now, personally, I'd have kept the recording of a successful Harry pocketed it. See, I can't say pocketed it, and then just dropped it in every time. Yeah. But no, it demonstrates the point, doesn't it? I mean, who could be more erudite than Stephen Fry? And yet there's a combination. There's a combination of words that are a trip hazard.
Right, number 2 in these tips.
Yeah. It's linked really, because if you're say you're going to be giving a presentation or a speech, or of course making a recording of some sort, it doesn't need to be a professional voiceover, but you're having to record something or speak in front of a group. I'd always recommend doing some test recordings and listening to yourself back. Honestly, listening to yourself back honestly, kindly, but not generously. So is there variation in your pacing and your emphasis, in the patterns of your speech, or do you tend to follow a certain prosody? When you read, does it sound natural and conversational? Does it sound as though you're reading? Try to be objective about it. Do you sound boring? I know that's a really harsh question to ask. Do you sound bored? I mean, I've been in churches and heard readings given by vicars who couldn't sound less convinced or interested in what they're reading. And yet these are people who've dedicated their lives to following a faith, but they're unable to read the word, apparently, of God without sounding bored. which is incredible. I've rejected podcasts that I've found that I thought this could be full of really useful tips about, I don't know, it could be LinkedIn, it could be about anything, about networking, about accountancy, it could be about anything, but I'm unable to listen to it because I can't cope with the fact that the host sounds bored out of their mind or has a terribly monotonous pitch, so nothing changes at all throughout the whole delivery. I mean, you could have the most beautiful honey-like tone to your voice, but unless you vary the way you talk, unless you're interested in what you're talking about, people are going to switch off. So record yourself, play yourself back, and inject some passion and feeling into what you're saying, if you don't already. Some people are just naturally amazing, aren't they? And gripping and engaging, and others, sadly, less so.
But that is why AI voices will never really take over unless they put in human expression and feeling. And
I like to think so. I mean, I think, and on that note, actually, Julie, I think that while AI is undoubtedly improving, and in theory can do expressions of sad, angry, scared, whatever it might be, the reality is that it'll never be able to give you the subtle varieties that you can get with a human performance, because in theory, I mean, I could give 3 very different reads for a script that have a totally different feel to them, but equally I can read the same sentence a dozen ways and just tweak the emphasis all the way, that will just have little differences, and you'll hear that one and go, that's the one I want. Whereas with an AI voice, how do you You need to be an audio wizard in the first place to manipulate it enough to come close to what a decent human can do.
And just before you give your last tip, but just on the subject of AI, I think it's quite important. And because there has been a lot of furore out, especially amongst voiceover artists. If you are a voiceover artist, or if you are thinking of becoming a voiceover artist, how do you protect yourself? Because AI, AI is out there. There's no putting the devil back in his box.
No.
But not a lot of companies are very the ethnicity or ethics of AI and use of AI hasn't been talked about enough, especially by large businesses. So how can you as a voiceover artist protect your voice? And it's the same with actors, protect your face. Actors, it's their face, it's their voice that are their fortunes. How can you protect that from AI? Is there any way? Because it doesn't really seem to be at the moment.
You can't get away from the fact that your raw audio is going to be out there somewhere. It's harder for an AI company, I think, to rip your voice if you've got music background, but it won't be long before that becomes irrelevant, frankly. So I think any opportunity to put pressure on governments to put legislation in place is a good thing. But ultimately, the only way you can protect yourself is by making sure that every job you undertake has a contract that stipulates that your voice will not be used for any sort of text-to-speech, artificial intelligence training, not even training, because in reality, lots of these AI engines have been built using either people being exploited for next to no money, or people's voices without their knowledge, or sometimes just because they've buried it down in the terms and conditions of your usage of a bit of software. If you store this over in the cloud here, we've got the right to access it and do what the hell we like with it, except no one's read all those reams of terms and conditions.
Read your contract, read your terms and conditions, and if you can't find anything, make sure you put it in.
I think
that's really key.
Sorry, was that going to be your third tip?
It wasn't actually. No. I was kind of sidestepping the AI debate because it's so annoying. But yes,
it's
that's right.
Because
it's important.
We need people, especially people who might be coming into the industry, need to go into it with their eyes wide open.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because otherwise your career could be over before it's even started by people
exactly right.
your one and only asset.
Exactly. And some of the sums that are thrown around sound initially, to someone who's not in the industry, as a great deal. Hold on, I'm going to get $2,000 for just doing 3 hours work, and I guess that's fine if you never want to work again. If you're doing something else and you're happy with the idea that what you're doing will make life harder for a load of other people further down the line, because if you're lending your voice to AI training, then you are essentially helping do people out of work.
Destroying the industry, essentially.
Destroying the industry. The same goes for...
On a lighter note, because we're going off on a tangent, on a lighter note, before we run out of time, what's your final tip?
Okay, it might sound vaguely patronizing at first, but I'm going to say I recommend practicing empathy. And in this instance, I don't mean being a more empathic person, although, if you aren't already, you probably should be. But because if you actively spend time thinking about and trying to feel the priorities, challenges, experiences, hopes and fears of people from all walks of life at every level of the corporate or social scale hierarchy, then you get better at seeing things from other perspectives. So that could be the most vulnerable person in the country, or it might be the most powerful person in the country. It might be the CEO of a company that's struggling, or it could be a single mother who's struggling to put food on the table. But if you can practice putting yourself in other people's shoes properly as a conscious thing, then you'll be a better marketer, a better communicator, a better writer, a better voice actor, a better business owner, a better boss, a better person. I don't think there is anything to lose by being more empathic. And obviously that comes more naturally to some people than others. Some people are more sensitive to this sort of thing than others. But the world is not black and white. What you're selling is not black and white. What you're writing about is not black and white. nothing is so clear cut that it doesn't require nuance of understanding. And if you start looking at things from different perspectives, properly putting yourselves into other people's situations, then you become better at almost anything you do.
Yeah, I agree. Right, we've come to that point in the show. I've been sitting here shuffling my cards while I've been listening to you give those very, very great and good advice. So thank you very much for those. We're going to play a little game now called the Values Jam. So this is the on the couch part of On the Couch. Anthony, we're going to get inside your psyche now.
Oh dear, it's a dark place in there, Melanie. You don't want to do it.
Oh, well, good. Reveal it to us.
You're pleased, okay.
I'm going to run my finger over my card and you're going to tell me to stop, and then we're going to pick a value and talk about it.
Oh, Lord, okay. Stop.
Right, let's have a look. You picked. Ooh, you picked. Ooh, this is quite a good one for a voiceover artist, actually. So we know a lot of voiceover artists, don't we, Julian? They're such lovely people.
No, well, they're pretending, but yeah, carry on.
You picked collaboration.
Oh, collaboration.
So we're going to ask you creatively about collaboration.
Okay.
So, Anthony, collaboration.
Yeah.
What does collaboration mean to you? First of all, what does it look like? You could see it. What does it look like to you?
Well, this is going to sound cheesy now, but I'm going to say that it's arms around shoulders.
Oh, I like that. I like that. What does it feel like?
It feels like it's going to feel warm. It's going to feel like consideration has been given to who you are and what you think and what the outcomes for any situation will be for you as a consequence of whatever it is that's being collaborated over.
Nice, I like it. As a voiceover artist, what does it sound like?
What does it sound like? It sounds like a better delivered script.
Good answer. Good answer. If it had a smell, what would it smell like?
Oh gosh, that's interesting. I'm going to say it's going to be a roast dinner. And the reason I say that is just because if you're collaborating, then the point is that you're bringing together lots of different ideas and viewpoints. And a roast dinner, let's face it, has got a lot of different elements to it.
Absolutely.
We're complementing each other.
Yeah,
you hope. Yeah.
You hope.
Yeah. How do you think more collaboration could change? Better collaboration could change the world?
Oh God, I mean, what couldn't it improve? What couldn't it improve? There can't be a business, there cannot be a situation that can't be improved by actually getting people in the same room to talk about things, to understand. It's actually that empathy point, isn't it? It's understanding another viewpoint, what effect your actions have on someone else, what the outcome is physically, emotionally, financially, whatever. And therefore working towards a solution that is perhaps a compromise, but ultimately more successful and will have more longevity, you know.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, it's been wonderful talking to you, Anthony, and you've given us very much food for thought, lots of food for thought. And we really appreciate you coming on the couch to talk to us about what you do.
It was a pleasure and an honor to be asked. Thank you very much indeed. It's
been a delight. And they say we have so many guests that we could just talk to on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Now it's not enough. I'm looking at the clock. We've got to wind it up in a minute. I don't want to. It's been absolutely amazing talking to you. But until next time, we're going to have to say goodbye. So thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you.